Okay, so good afternoon, morning, evening to wherever you guys are joining us from, and welcome to today's session of Emergence Global. I'm Hugo, and I'll be your host for today's session. For today's session, I'm very excited to welcome our keynote presenter, Brendan Rogers, co-founder of 2AM VC, an early-stage India fund. Previously, Brendan co-founded WAG, the largest pet platform in the US, and is also an active advisor and mentor to many companies, accelerators, and universities around the globe. He's a frequent speaker at some of the largest startup conferences in the world, speaking in over 10 international countries. Brendan has also appeared on some of the top podcasts in the startup industry, gaining tens of millions of views. Before WAG, Brendan co-founded a social discovery service to meet new people, which grew to over 50 million users in over 10 countries and was acquired by IAC in 2014. Thanks for joining us this evening, Brendan.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the wonderful intro, and I'm very looking forward to the session. Thank you again.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's just jump straight in. Would you please introduce yourself and give us some background?
Yeah. So I'm calling in from Florida, sunny Florida at the moment. I'll keep it short on the background, but I grew up in Rhode Island, small state, United States. And then in 2011, I moved to Silicon Valley. I have a kind of a unique story. My grandmother was getting a tax return and she was giving her grandkids some of the tax returns. So I didn't have any money, but my grandma gave me $1,200 and I took a suitcase and went straight to Palo Alto. When I was in Palo Alto, I moved with my friends to, just start an internet company. I think this was right when like the Facebook movie came out, and that's where the big leagues were. So, was the first business that I started was in the online dating space, specifically around when the Facebook API opened in like 2009, 10. So it was kind of when you had the huge rise of Farmville and obviously Zynga, et cetera. So if you're in Europe right now, it was very similar to like a Badoo, but it sat on top of Facebook. So it was really good distribution, channel and stuff like that. So that was the first business. A lot of learnings, a lot of ups and downs. Realized that when you rely on another platform for distribution, it's really not the best idea long term. So after that business, we sold the assets and moved down to Los Angeles, and that's when I started WAG, which was the Uber dog walking at first, and now it's the button on your phone for your paw. And over the last year and a half, I've been able to transition from kind of founder to now VC, but I still wear my founder hat every single day. And I don't like to call myself a VC. I still like to call myself a founder. So now investing in India, and I'm excited to share more about why India and kind of my journey thus far.
Fantastic. Thank you for giving that introduction. And again, thank you for being with us today. So I think before we go into, your new venture as a founder of a VC, and in India, I'd like to talk a bit about, the intersection of being a founder and now an investor, right? So having achieved significant success with WAG and your social discovery service, can you share some insights on how your experiences as a founder have influenced your approach to investing and evaluating startups?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm not an engineer. So, I believe if you're not an engineer in startups, you wear every other hat that's humanly possible. So kind of during my time as a founder, I wore many different hats from, on the growth side to the ops side to the recruiting side. So I learned just kind of everything on the go and really kind of just, network with like-minded people in those specific spaces, just so I could figure out how to kind of move fast and execute on all those responsibilities. So I learned a lot and wore many different hats as a founder. And I truly believe that if you're investing in pre-seed, seed, which I do now, I believe the best investors at that stage are former founders, just because they have worn so many different hats. They've gone through the trenches. They can talk to you at 2 a.m. in the morning. And when you're having co-founder dilemmas, they can, kind of weather the storm. So I think that all of the experiences I've had as a founder has really allowed me to really diligence other founders and really see from a people perspective what works and what doesn't work as founders. So I think that my judge of character has really become a lot stronger as going through all of these different founder journeys and having the ups and downs and stuff. So that's what's really, I think, helped. And then also just like being able to identify unique business models, unique industries, seeing companies that have been able to get traction early on, and just really kind of relating that to my experience has just allowed me to move faster and whatnot, and really diligence the founding team. And then I would also say lastly, like from a deal flow perspective, I feel like a lot of founders, they want like the tier ones in their seed rounds. And I believe that that's sometimes you can shoot yourself in the foot when you do that. So, I think from a top of funnel perspective, with me being a founder previously, has allowed me to acquire just way more deals and just really widen that top of funnel, because I think other founders want that value, because in the grand scheme of things, like the money's really irrelevant. It's really like the value that the investor provides. I'd rather, if I was to raise $1 million and I get the $1 million, but none of those investors ever want to talk to me, it would suck. I would rather want investors that are going to move the needle, are going to help me for specific things that I need help with, et cetera. So I think it's transitioned. I think being a founder to investor I'm very grateful. And I think that it's allowed me to move a lot faster.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that I've spoken to a couple of investors recently, and they're usually from VCs, and they're saying that the support needed for companies is now a lot higher than before, because the capital, like you said, is more and more irrelevant as more and more people look to invest in these younger startups. So you kind of have to differentiate yourself as an investor nowadays. So staying on that, what kind of mentorship perhaps do you think you offer as an investor that's different to what you've seen before when you were perhaps a founder?
I think that so like from an India specific lens, myself and my fund provides really the bridge for Indian founders to get access to outside capital, outside of India rather. What I've seen in my journey thus far in India is that Indian founders want access, to global firms and just global capital. And a lot of the local Indian investors operate very separately from other firms and stuff like that. And that's been able for us to, get allocation, get into deals, and whatnot. So that's helped. And I think that what it allows founders to be like, okay, well, I have the 2AM is a diverse firm on our cap table. They're going to help us get access to US capital, et cetera. And then also there's like this huge, from an India specific lens, there's obviously this massive SaaS thesis that I have. And also there's amazing SaaS companies being built in India, but selling into the US. And a lot of these founders, want access to their early adopters and customers so they can really A/B test and iterate and, see what works and what doesn't work. So given our backgrounds, we've been able to really help these SaaS founders get their initial customers and stuff like that. So that allows us to really kind of separate ourselves from other VCs. And then I think that, from a global lens of kind of how I personally, I think, create value and give to founders is obviously what we just talked about is, going through the trenches and going through a lot of the similar experiences, I think off the bat help a lot. But one thing that I was very grateful for, in my time as a founder is I did a lot of the recruiting. So from engineering hiring all the way up to executive level to corp roles, whatever it is. And typically, when you raise money, one of the first things you pretty much do is you look to hire people, whether if that's another engineer or that's a growth person or whatever the case may be. So, believe it or not, when I first started angel investing, I was able to get into some of these rounds because I was like, look, like I have so many engineer friends that would be great, like, founding team members, et cetera. And it's really hard to hire like, early on. Like it's way hard. It's way easier to hire when when you raise a ton of money. But when you're like looking for that second or third engineer on your team, like that person has to be like absurdly passionate like yourselves. And like, it's really hard to find that. And you're probably not going to pay them like what, a Facebook or Google could pay them. So like, it's really hard to convince people. So I feel like that's helped me kind of get into deals and create a unique edge. But yeah, and I think like as a founder too, like the if you're building in a specific space that you like, if say you're building in like the delivery space, 10-minute delivery space, you'd probably want to bring on angels that have had a ton of experience in that space or with delivery spaces, et cetera. And even if their check size is like, super small, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that they either have built a network in that space, they have a ton of experience in that space, they know how to operate in that space. That's going to go way farther than just a larger random check and stuff like that. So that's some of the ways that we've kind of make ourselves different, and like how I've made myself different, et cetera.
Fantastic. Yeah. Sounds like it sounds like you provide a lot. And touching upon that, it's these are key lessons that you've learned as a founder in the past. But what have you had to learn in order? What new skills or perspectives have you had to develop going into becoming an investor?
Patience. I come from the background of grow at all costs, blitz scale. Let's just blow this out of the water. And then we'll figure out like kind of everything else later on. What's interesting that I've learned as a VC, and I love the businesses that grow fast. Who doesn't, right? But as a VC, especially when you're diversifying, you're investing in many different sectors, you're investing at obviously the same stage, but some companies have a little bit more traction than others. What I've had to learn is like patience is such a unique skill set that, I kind of overlooked. So some of these companies that I invest in, if it's even pre-product, pre-launch, or even if they've launched a little bit, if it takes 7 to 8 months to get to X amount of dollars in revenue, that's okay. Like it's not going to go from, zero to, massive every single time. So I think patience has something that I've had to develop and be okay with. And that's totally fine. And then also like taking more risk, like, I feel like I'm just given my background and what I'm used to is very consumer heavy marketplaces. Obviously some SaaS for sure, fintech, but there's sectors now, specifically in India, like health tech and even space tech. And there's other sectors now that like I would have never even thought of investing in, just because it's like, it could take a while to go live and stuff like that. So I've been able to, like, some of the lessons that I've learned is like, you should really spread your wings and really diligence industries that are growing, that are emerging, et cetera. So I've been able to really spread my wings, and I'm grateful because my co-founder, he's invested in some businesses that are, not really out there, just one, like, he's invested in like an electric airline company and stuff like that. And typically those spaces are not something that I seek, but I can see the value there and stuff like that. So those are probably the two lessons that I've learned, at least immediately as a VC.
Okay, great. So now let's switch the conversation to 2 a.m. And I guess why the name? Why 2 a.m.?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. So in my experience, and maybe you can relate, or other people can relate, that are listening, but for me, and I promise I won't swear on this keynote, but
it's fine. It's fine.
I have a mouth like a sailor, but all the crazy stuff that happens to me in my founder experience is usually in the middle of the night, whether if that's, you push a build live, nothing works, customers are going crazy, you hit 1 million users. Like the craziest things always happen to me in the middle of the night. But what's super special is that during all those times, the early employees, the investors, the funds, the angels, whoever it is, they were with me at 2 a.m. in the morning, whether if the whole thing was burning down, going to zero, or if the thing was going to the moon. And I was like, if I'm going to do this thing as an investor, I need to be there when no one's going to be there for the founders. And that's why I named it 2 a.m. And also, oddly enough, I operate so in India and kind of where I'm at in the world. It's like either I'm up at 2 a.m. or they're up at 2 a.m. from their time zone perspective. So it's actually kind of ironic, but yeah, that's pretty much that's why I name that specifically. But when I think about, and every time when people ask me that question or like, whatever it is, it brings me back to a time where like I can just like remember like, man, this crazy stuff happened, and I was able to get on the phone with one of our angels, and he or she answered, and they helped us through this time. And like, I just know that like, I don't want to just write a check and that's it. Like I tell founders, I'm like, this relationship doesn't stop until like, it's never going to stop. I'm going to invest in your next company. Like I want to be the fund where the founder is about to go ring the Bombay Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, and they still call me the night before, even when they've raised crazy amount of money, crazy successful, they still call me and they still ask me questions. That is the investor, and that's the legacy, and that's the fund that Herschel and I are creating, and that's who we want to be. And I just don't want to just send money and just be like some like person on the cap table that like doesn't provide any value. So
That's beautiful story. Actually, it's probably the best story behind a name. So that's cool. So now, what sparked your interest in India? Because U.S. born and bred.
Yeah.
So why India?
So yeah, I'll keep it short, but basically like, I know I don't look like your typical Indian investor. I think I'm probably one of the only white bald guys walking the streets of Bangalore. In 2019, I was kind of really at a crossroads in my life. Wanted to figure out kind of what was next. And I started building, my personal brand on LinkedIn and started to share my story, and just started meeting a bunch of people, whether it was founders, angels, VCs, whatever it is. And I met a gentleman by the name of Herschel Mehta, and he was born and raised in LA, but he was of Indian descent. His parents were from Mumbai. And he was telling me about his angel portfolio and stuff like that. But he told me that his cousin started this like YC accelerator type model in Mumbai. And I thought that was really interesting. And his cousin was also an exited founder, and, was one of the first angels to really be able to really diligence tech in like 2009, 2010, and was able to get in a couple of amazing unicorns and stuff like that. So he did really, really well. So I, developed a relationship with Herschel. I would send him deals. That was another thing, is like, I would get a ton of deal flow, like from either Indian founders, just people kind of all over, just being on LinkedIn and stuff. So what I would do is like, going back to providing value, is I would just send deals to people that I knew that could write checks. And I wanted to show people that I could get amazing deal flow. So send a bunch of deals to Herschel. Herschel started investing in some of them. And I randomly got an email one morning from Herschel saying, "Hey, come to India. It's my cousin's first demo day at his accelerator. And the accelerator is called 100x.vc. That's when, my intuition and my gut was like, you got to go. So I apparently Herschel sent this email to 50 people, and I was the only guy that showed up.
At 2 a.m. At 2 a.m.
Right. I landed in Mumbai at like 2 a.m. So,
Right.
and granted, like I did nothing for 11 years as a founder, like literally nothing. Didn't travel, didn't go anywhere. I lived in LA and I've never even been to Yosemite, like just crazy stuff. And this was the first experience for me to like really go somewhere and go on an adventure. So I went, and when I landed in Mumbai, I'm not sure if you've ever been to India or not, but you said you lived in China, so I'm sure it's probably a little bit similar in some regards. But to me, going to India for the first time was like I teleported to like a different planet, and it was so cool, and the energy, and I felt like I was on a journey. It was just like it was so cool. And I went to the demo day, fell in love with the founders, saw what Sanjay was building, and I was like, there's something here. And then there's obviously a lot of macro trends, like, half the population is under the age of 27. There's a huge digital revolution happening in India right now. People are coming on the internet at a massive pace in tier 3, tier 4 cities. Data is very cheap. People are coming into the middle class. It's an English speaking, or there's a lot of English speaking folks, first language. It's very technical. There's been a history of just technical talent, and the country is getting digitized, and there's so much capital coming into the country. People are kind of exiting China for like whatever reasons, politically, et cetera. And a lot of the manufacturing is kind of going into India, and there's a lot of just the spotlights on India. And then lastly, there's historically people would leave India to go to the US or abroad to go to school and then get a job. But now people are staying home and they're building. $100,000 salary in LA is unfortunately, it doesn't get you that far, but $100,000 in Bangalore, you're living an amazing life. So people are staying home and building. But that's when I was like, man, I have to be a part of this. I think that there's an opportunity for me to provide access to these Indian founders in the US, but also I think that there's an opportunity from like a founder-led fund, because there's not many founder-led funds in India at all. And that's when I knew Herschel. He was the perfect partner because, first of all, he's amazing. He's a genius. He's very analytical. I'm not. And we really get help from the family and hit that legacy and stuff like that. So we've been able to move way faster, and this wouldn't be possible without Herschel and his family and stuff like that. So it's been giving us a kind of a leg up and whatnot. So I knew it was a perfect kind of match. And, we were able to raise Fund 1 very, very quickly. And what was interesting is that, a lot of magazines, conferences, just like people started seeing me post on LinkedIn and get a lot of visibility. And people are like, who's this white guy talking about India that loves India so much? And why is he investing there? And, I'm extremely passionate about doing it. And I feel like I'm providing a ton of value to founders, and hopefully these companies will change the world. I believe they will, and India. So, it's been one hell of a journey, but it's interesting because LinkedIn, so the second largest country in the world from a DAU and MAU perspective, on LinkedIn is India. And most of the VCs and angels are sourcing on like Twitter or whatever the case may be. I quadrupled down on LinkedIn because of my audience or because of where I'm investing, and also because there's so much DAU there from India. So I've been able to really build a personal brand in a super wide top of funnel where I can just get a ton of deal flow and just really stand out and stuff from on LinkedIn. And that's been really able to help and stuff like that. So that's the kind of the high level story of it all. And it's been a hell of a journey. Like I didn't want to be like, and I've said this before publicly, like I don't want to be like the 1001 seed fund in Silicon Valley. Like I don't want to do that. I don't want to walk around and go up and down Palo Alto with a Patagonia vest and be like, let me get in your deal. Like, I don't want to, no disrespect. I mean, those people are genius. Like they're absurdly smart. I respect them, but like, I wanted to do something where I'm like, I'm investing in a new frontier, a new market. And I can stand out and I can get into the best deals. and I can move fast and I can enjoy doing it. Like I get to go to India like 6 times a year. I spend a lot of time there. It's fun, like I wake up every day and I'm just like, man, this is people look at me and they're like, why are you doing this? You're crazy. And I'm like, man, I don't give a shit. I'm super passionate. I'm just having fun. So
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I can't speak about the investing and stuff, but having grown up in Asia and China, it's just a different vibe when you get there. I don't know, it's just like I feel like the media portrays these countries as so different, and they are different, but they're also very good different. They're not always the bad different. So I completely understand that. But I think coming back to you and the obviously you've talked about the opportunities, with under a certain age, under 28, under 27, the largest population there. But what are some challenges and opportunities that you have encountered while investing in Indian startups, as opposed to maybe those? I know you probably haven't invested much into the US landscape, but as a founder, but also, with friends around in Palo Alto and stuff, what challenges and opportunities you have in the Indian startups as opposed to those in the US?
yeah, so I think the challenges, well, no, I won't start with the challenge. I'll start with the opportunities. So the opportunities is from like an investor perspective is entry point. So, the valuations are obviously lower in India and they're way more digestible at that specific stage. So I was very attracted to my entry point into these deals. Whereas, you go to Silicon Valley and pre-launch, pre-product, pre-everything, you're investing at like, 25 mil caps is like, I just don't want to play that game. That's not me. So the advantages are entry point for sure. The other advantage is in India, you don't need that much capital to get something off the ground and actually get a little bit of traction. So money goes way farther in India. You have, talent. You have a huge group of individuals that are mobile first that could be your early adopters in your test bed and stuff. So those are the two things that I'm excited about. And then the third thing I mentioned it earlier is like majority of founders, like I rarely talk to founders that don't know how to write code, like very rarely, like very rarely. So it's a very technically first country, which allows founders to move fast. Like, they don't need to hire engineers to get something off the ground. So just the pace is something that is very interesting that I'm very excited about. And then in terms of like the challenges, I think that things move slow in India from an investment lens. So like, for an example, if the startup is not registered in the US or Singapore, and it's an India domiciled company, sometimes the rounds and the compliance can take a while. So, if founders are raising 500K and it takes, 2.5 months to get the money, they're basically, their hands are almost tied behind their backs. So they can't really move that fast. So there's a challenge there. And then there's also a challenge in terms of like, I think this is changing, but I think that the average revenue per user spend is not as high as like the US or Europe. So like just average order values and stuff like that, and just LTV on customers is not as high as these other areas. So, you can talk to a founder that has 2 million users, but the ARPUs and stuff like that are not that high. So it's like, you have to really get underneath the hood and really understand the business models, and the take rates are lower than in the US and in India or in Europe. So like, it's really kind of diligencing the business model and kind of extrapolating out, does this make sense at scale? And like, can this business really make money and stuff like that? So I think that's slowly changing as people become more in the middle class and there's more capital that's being distributed and stuff like that within the country. I think another challenge is there is there's founders that believe that if they take a business model that works in the West, that they can put that in Europe or put that in India and it will work. So there's a lot of like copycats. And I think that's slowly changing with the markets with the way that it is, that like a lot of these individuals are being weeded out. But so I started the fund in 2021, but there was a lot of founders that had really good backgrounds that would just look at a business model in the US and then go raise money off of like literally the same thing. And just like we're not able to just get anything like, get any traction, or it didn't even make sense in India to launch that. And I think that there's just some of the challenges are like there's founders have really good backgrounds, but they may not be the best founders. So it's really diligencing the right founders, really kind of peeling back the onion and seeing like, just because you have this background, can you actually get a product live? Can you get people to use it? And stuff like that. So, and then lastly, I would say that like, there's like late stage India, I think is still early. Like it's still early. It's still growing. I mean, like the liquidity markets are not like the US and in Europe. So there is a lot of US companies buying India companies. There's companies that go public on the Bombay Stock Exchange. You do have to be profitable to be on the Bombay Stock Exchange. So like, or at least to start the listing. So I think that over time, I think liquidity will get better at the late stage, but I think it's a little bit challenging right now, especially if you're like at that mid stage to late stage investor. But for pre-seed seed, I think it's amazing because our entry points are so low. It makes sense, and stuff like that. So I think those are some of and yeah, those are definitely some of the challenges and and whatnot.
Yeah. So in terms of the startups that you've seen, or maybe the ones that maybe you haven't invested in, but that you've seen in India, do a lot of them tend to start in India and then grow in India, or do they like try to grow somewhere else first? I don't know
That's a
if
great
that's making
question.
sense.
Great question. So I think if it's like a unique India use case and pain point, it's just India. But from like a SaaS perspective, it's pretty much like they'll get one or two customers in India from a SaaS lens and then immediately launch into the US.
Mm.
I do not see founders like building in India, but like selling into like Singapore or Dubai or the U or like the UAE or whatever the case may be. It's pretty much like, build in India, sell in India, or in SaaS, build in India and then get one or two customers and then sell into the US or elsewhere. There was a time where in 2021 where there's a lot of Indian founders moving to Southeast Asia to start businesses. And that's obviously a way different markets, totally different beast, which I'm not involved in. But no, it's pretty much like if it's an India specific use case, they launch in India. There's a whole like, I'm not too exposed to it, nor am I an expert whatsoever, but there is like a Web3 community in India that's gotten really large just because of the whole Polygon movement and stuff. So a lot of those founders will like be based in Dubai for whatever tax reasons or whatever the case may be, and then kind of launch in India and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't invest in Indian SaaS companies that sell to Indian companies, if that makes sense. I only invest in SaaS companies that sell into the US. And then now, since we're on that point, another kind of thing that I always do and make sure it is like whenever I invest in an Indian company, whether it's Indian domiciled or not, there has to be a local Indian angel or fund on the cap table. Like I will never just be the only investor, or I will not be investing with me and people from California or something like that. I need to have somebody that, was born in India, that like has diligence like this market, that also has the same conviction that I do. And that's allowed us to really like, kind of avoid like, deals that we thought were good that actually never kind of panned out and stuff like that.
That makes sense. No, that's a definitely a very interesting one as well. Yeah, definitely. How, like, talking about that, you talked about the evolution from 2021 to now as well, in regards to what we're speaking about. But how do you think, and I know this is a vague question, but how do you think the Indian startup ecosystem has evolved over the years, right? So, and what trends do you foresee in the coming years?
Yeah, I think that like, you had you had like the whole Flipkart movement. So like, Flipkart got bought by Walmart, the multi-billion-dollar business. They started like the e-com revolution in India. I think that now there is, with the rise of the country being more digitized and how, payment infrastructure is digitized, et cetera, there's been a lot of more open-minded individuals that are like, I'm going to create my own businesses and stuff because they see that, there's a point in time in 2021 where there's a new unicorn every week coming out of India. And I think that with this young population in India, it's more of a risk-free mindset. Historically, having conversations with Herschel and others, is that Indian families would be like, we want, become a doctor or an engineer, et cetera. Now the families are like, it's okay to go start your own business. It's okay to take a year off from college, like go build, be risk-free. So we've seen there's way more founders. There's a lot of technical folks that took a lot of risk, joined these startups that have blown up, and they saw that in a good way, and they've seen that their equity, can actually turn into something. So now they're like, wow, I got a taste of this. I saw how this thing can go from 0 to 1. Maybe it's my turn to like build something. So there's been a huge influx of just new founders, more risk-free mindsets. This young population is risk-free. They're building, they're willing to test and try new products and stuff like that. And a lot of them are actually getting paid in USD, so there's more liquidity and stuff like that. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
The second part was what trends do you foresee?
Yeah, so I think that we touched on SaaS. I think that just SaaS and just no code tools, just specific SaaS software, I think that will do phenomenally well. I'm also like very bullish on like believe it or not, fashion. I mean, there's specific use cases, but I think fashion e-com is really interesting. Not so much like brands, but more so like the infrastructure tools, the foundations and stuff like that. We invested in a company called Numi.Asia that is basically the Shein of India. So I'm sure you're aware of Shein, fast fashion. So Shein does not operate in India, but we see this massive young female Indian population that they want to wear, specific items, whether if it's, cool t-shirts, dresses, shirts, whatever it is. And Zara and H&M, like the price points are just like way too high. So we invested in this company that basically provides fast fashion to women at a very, very affordable rate. And it's like, it's trendy, cool clothes and stuff like that. So that we think that is going to be a massive business. I think that there's trends in like the health tech space. So if it's like, whether if it's like digitizing pharmacies, we've invested in a company that basically turns a lot of gold store and jewelry store owners being able for them to create their own websites and really digitize them and delivery and stuff like that. And that's a very unique Indian pain point with gold and jewelry. And then I just think fintech in general, I think fintech kind of ties, everything together. So very bullish on the whole fintech space. We've also are excited about the ed tech space as well too. People think that market's like very saturated in India, which in some regards it is, but I think just, Indians will always pay for education. They'll always want their kids to be educated. And then lastly, I think like just food in general. So I think that there's been a huge kind of run up with delivery companies and stuff like that. But I think that there's a huge opportunity to provide more innovation around food, specifically like healthy food and stuff like that. So those are some of the sectors that like we constantly look at. And then, like I said earlier, it's like space tech, more marketplaces, upskilling. We think upskilling is a massive industry in India. So I think those are some of the trends from a super high level that I think will accelerate and continue to accelerate. Web3, we're obviously in this bear market. Everyone like jumps, they turn their head when they hear the word Web3. But I think that it's interesting because kind of as technology advances and innovation, keeps happening, I think eventually there will be a place and time for Web3 and stuff like that. So we like to have diversity in the portfolio, and we have some great bets in the Web3 space. But like I said earlier, there's a lot of Web3 engineers in India. And I think right now, especially in this bear market, this is the time to build and stuff like that. So we think that that's, a trend that, we're keeping an eye on, not necessarily jumping in at, but just something that we're definitely eyeing and stuff like that. So yeah, those are the trends that we've seen, and that we're excited about. But like I said earlier, again, is like, I look at everything. So like, one of the best jobs about being a VC is like, I get to also be educated on new industries, new trends, new things that are happening. And every time I go to India, it's like I learn something new that's like about like what, like there's things in India that will work that would never work in the United States. And it's interesting because I'm continuously learning. I'm learning about new industries, new trends and stuff like that. So yeah.
Cool. Very cool. I guess, whilst being on the ground, a lot of a large sway of the Indian population still live in rural areas. Are you seeing more and more startups coming from that region, from the rural areas, or are a lot of them, like the majority of them, in urban settings?
That's a great question. We see, so there's founders that like that will live in some of these smaller cities, but they'll move to like a Bangalore or like a Delhi/Gurgaon to build. Um, so I see that a lot, whereas like most of the founders that are in Bangalore are actually not from Bangalore. But we've invested in a few deals where the companies are based in these smaller cities and they've launched and they've got traction, and then they move the headquarters to like a Bangalore. We see that. We invested in a company called Aptamart, which basically launched in like a tier 3 city, and they basically in India there's like these local shops called Kiranas, and they basically turn Kiranas into Aptamarts, where they manage the product, and they digitize the whole store and stuff like that. But that launched in like a really small tier 3 cities. So they were able to get a lot of traction, and they realized that like with their traction and the money that they've been able to raise, they moved to Bangalore so they can scale and whatnot. I'm seeing more businesses being started that are based in these bigger cities, but they're selling into the smaller cities and stuff like that, because with the likes of Geo and how 5G and data is very cheap, there is now these individuals that live in these smaller cities have access to the internet, which now a lot of these founders are building businesses for those smaller cities and stuff like that. So yeah, we're kind of seeing a little bit all of the above, but mainly a lot of the founders are moving to the major cities, just because of quality of life, more things to do, access to specific things. Like I don't know. I don't know if I asked you or not, but if you've ever been to Bangalore, it's like so funny. It's just like Palo Alto in some settings, where it's like you have all the VCs lined up. You have like a area where all the founders live, and then you have like a coffee shop that is called Third Wave, which there's like a bunch of them. But you'll see like all the founders that like have scruffy hair, and their shirt has stains all over it, and that they've been building like for the last year. And then the person across the table is like a freshly cut investor, and deals are happening at the coffee shop, and it's a cool vibe. People are walking around with like swag where they work at, and like it just is more energy and stuff like that. So we're seeing a lot of founders just kind of like pack up and just move to these cities because they just have more of an opportunity. You can network and stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, that's not only in India, right? Even in the US, it's the same. People either go to New York or LA, San Francisco. In the UK, a lot of people either go to London or Edinburgh. So I guess that's not only an India specific thing. I saw somewhere, I don't remember where, that you guys have a strong focus, or you want to have more focus on AI and ML. Um, can you discuss this? Again, large question, but can you discuss the significance of these technologies for India's economic growth and development?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have like, we're definitely excited about AI and ML, and I take these trends with a grain of salt when I keep seeing them all the time. I think that AI and ML will definitely be here. The question is when and who's the right jockey to build the right businesses. But I think that just AI and ML for just various sectors in India will be able to just push that sector a lot forward. So like, in health tech, for an example, like, if you can go in to see your primary care physician and, AI is taking, AI is taking notes, and then it can really kind of speed up that process so doctors can see more patients and stuff like that. And whatnot. I think there's specific use cases that AI and ML will definitely accelerate specific sectors in India. And I'm very bullish on that. I'm very excited about it. Um, and I think that will overall increase the growth of the economy and help people just, have better experiences and stuff. But I do think that like on a macro lens, like it's funny because like in my small journey in India and in Silicon Valley is like, there's like trends that like just get so hot and that everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and it's like what everybody's talking about. And I've seen it with when I first moved to Silicon Valley, it was the Groupon days, which was the group buying. And then I saw it with like obviously mobile apps, which is still here today. And then I saw it with the scooter revolution with like Bird Scooter and everything. And then you have like, yeah, the Uber for X model and stuff like that. And I think like AI and ML is just like such a massive, massive space. It's just that I think there's so much hype right now where going forward, it will definitely help society. It will definitely help the growth of multiple economies and stuff. The question is like, who are the real businesses that are building in this space that are actually providing the most value? Because like right now, yeah, I'm assuming Chat GPT and all these tools, like they have their open API and they're probably pushing on developers to build on their open APIs and stuff like that, just to get more developers in the ecosystem, which is great. But the question is like, is this just a is this just a fad where people are just in like, a year from now just going to stop building in this, and then slowly we'll have transition into, main companies that are actually going to provide a ton of the value and stuff like that? I don't know. But yeah, I'm not I'm not waking up every day saying I need to talk to AI and ML founders like every single day. I'm like kind of just taking like bits by bits, not all into it. And it's funny. Do you remember like this whole, like, I mean, of course you remember it, but you remember like the metaverse and NFTs?
Yeah.
That was so crazy, especially being in Florida with Miami and all this stuff. Like, I believe the metaverse will exist at some point in time in human history, but like in NFTs, sure, but like there was so much hype and building and like, projects that never got launched, and like, people just, releasing these ICOs, and like everyone's going in the metaverse. And I think everything in startups is timing. And like, now if I don't know if I mean if I don't know any investor on planet Earth that is investing in metaverse or NFT companies right now. So not trying to be an asshole, but like I think that space, it will happen, but like I don't think the world is ready for that right now.
Yeah,
But
that's a fair point. I mean, yeah, it is a fair point. I just think with I was again having this discussion with someone, an investor in AI the other day, right? Um, and they made a very good point that a lot of the AI prior to Chat GPT was a lot focused on building the the AI, right? Building the AI. And now with the launch of Chat GPT, you have the likes of Microsoft today really announcing, the launch of their AI for different things. And a lot what they were saying was that we're going to see a lot more applications, but I think the development of AI to what we know today is going to slow down quite drastically because companies are now going to focus on applications for end users rather than growing the actual back end of the AI. And again, I'm not an expert in this, but I thought that was a pretty good analysis of the situation.
Yeah, no, and thank you for sharing. That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because I think that like as I look back on like where do I think AI could really like kind of push the world forward, and there's a lot of different spaces that I think that one that just sticks out of mind is like content creation. Like if you're like creating content is hard consistently day on day, but if you can have AI tools that just provide that push and can kind of do that for you, and I think slowly but surely that these applications will help everybody's daily lives and make people not have to waste time and stuff like that. So it's super interesting. I think it's very, very fascinating. Yeah, it's just there's a lot of hype right now, like crazy hype. But
There's
like,
everywhere you go.
good for the
And
ecosystem, I guess.
yeah, it is good because especially after last year where it was quite a slow year. I think AI on the back end of 2022 really launched kind of another wave of capital injection, but only into AI companies. So I'm seeing a lot of more companies who I work with who just throw the term AI in there. Even on LinkedIn, people just try to use that as a buzzword. But anyways, coming back to the discussion, because just conscious of time, what needs, in your opinion, what needs to happen for more investors to open their eyes to the Indian investment landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, in India, if you look at first of all, the amount of people, and how I mentioned earlier, like it's a technically first country. And if you look at how technical, like if everybody in India most of the people they can code and they're very passionate, hardworking individuals. I think that investors that want access to a market where it's moving at light speed, it's absurdly digitized, and entry points make sense. And it's at a point where like the country is at a point where it's just exploding with people coming onto the internet, spending money on the internet. It's an emerging market that I think will become one of the next, technologically hubs in the world. So if you're looking for access to founders that already have technical skill sets that can get products live without having to spend a ton of money, their backs against the wall, they're super passionate. And the government's very for startups. They want more innovation. In India, they call it the digital stack, where like there's something called UPI where you can instantly send money. There's something called the digital locker, which is Aadhaar, and they have your like digital records and IDs. And it's just with the likes of Geo, with Mukesh Ambani that owns Reliance, he's like making the whole country have 5G. It's unlimited data is very, very cheap. It's just an ecosystem that needs to not be ignored. And even with, Apple putting manufacturing in India now, everyone's leaving China. Money's coming out of China at a rapid pace. And everyone's looking at India and whatnot. So I think in the long term, this young Gen Z population in India is staying home and they're building great businesses, not just for India, but for the world. And then if I were to lastly just comment, like if I were to put my investment hat on and like, how can I optimize if I have only 10 bullets and it's like, I need to invest in the best companies around the world, where do I do this? I really, really, really think entry point matters. And I know that some people would argue with me where they're like, well, if it's a great founder, a great business, it's a great business. But in India, entry points, and even in like Southeast Asia, entry point it matters, and you can really multiply your check. Whereas in the US, to really make money in the US, you have to get in like the top 1% of deal flow. And that is absurdly hard if you provide zero value and you don't have a background. And that's me being 100% transparent. So when you're just investing at 30, 40, 50 caps as an angel, you're completely wasting your time, because if I'm speaking from an angel lens, you should only be angel investing if you're looking for 100x. It's like 100x or bust. And the way to get the 100x is you have to get in the 1% of deal flow, which is absurdly hard, or you need to get at entry points that make a ton of sense. And you have to, especially in these markets, be able to really diligence the business models and understand, the unit economics of the business. Is this business growing organically? A lot of these founders, they just assume that, like, they take your money and then they just give it to Mark Zuckerberg to run Facebook ads. That is a absurdly bad investment. These founders, I only invest in founders that have organically grown their business with their own money. And that may sound absolutely crazy, but like, if you can really diligence the founder and see like what have they done without any money and where's that company at today, I think that will at least get you a pretty far head start in understanding who is a good founder and who's not a good founder. So sorry for the segue on the question, but I know we didn't really get into like how to diligence founders and stuff, but yeah, anybody that has the capacity of writing an angel check, you should definitely look investing in India. I think that just lastly, India is a place where, for the years to come, there's going to be absurd innovation. People are hungry, and there's a lot of founders building great businesses. So happy to chat with anyone too. If you want, you can look at my portfolio at 2amvc.com. You can see kind of what I've invested in thus far. Not everything is on the portfolio on the website, but happy to chat with anyone. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brendan. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for anyone watching us live on YouTube or directly on the Chris platform. As Brendan said, if you guys want to chat to him either on LinkedIn, a bit of a LinkedIn star, and or on the website. But yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.